Before I say a single word, I want you to think about the last time you drove somewhere unfamiliar. A long road. No landmarks. Just fields, trees, and the occasional farmhouse blurring past your window. You probably didn't think twice about it. Most people don't. That's the thing about the countryside. It feels safe because it feels empty. But empty is exactly what makes it dangerous. There are no witnesses. No surveillance cameras. No neighbors close enough to hear you scream. Just you, the open road, and whatever's already out there waiting. Tonight I'm sharing 3 stories with you. 3 real accounts from real people who found that out the hard way. None of them were looking for trouble. They were just passing through. That's all it takes. Stay with me. Because the 3rd story, the one I'm saving for last, is the one that still keeps me up at night. Not because of what happened, but because of what almost did. Let's begin. Story 1. The strip of road I stopped for gas in the wrong town. I need to preface this by saying that I am not someone who scares easily. I grew up rough. I've had confrontations. I know what it feels like when the hair on the back of your neck stands up. But I also know the difference between instinct and paranoia, and for most of my life I've been pretty good at telling the two apart. What happened to me on a back road in the middle of nowhere tested everything I thought I knew about that. This was about 15 years ago, maybe a little more. I was in my early 20s. I was broke, I was ambitious in the wrong direction, and I had somehow convinced myself that I was going to be a professional stand-up comedian. In hindsight, spoiler alert, I was not. But at the time, I was dead serious. I was performing at every open mic I could find, grinding through sets that bombed more often than not, and driving obscene distances just to get 5 minutes in front of an audience. And I mean obscene. I was crossing state lines for gigs that paid me nothing. I was burning gas in a car that should have been retired 2 owners before it got to me, running on bald tires and hope. My phone was one of those ancient bricks that could barely hold a signal in a city, let alone the middle of rural America. But that night, something was different. A promoter had reached out to me through a local comedian I'd been networking with. There was a competition being held 5 hours away, a proper showcase for up-and-coming comics, with actual industry judges in attendance. Moderately famous guys. People who could open doors. The cash prize was $1,000, but honestly, that wasn't even what excited me. It was the chance to stand in front of people who actually mattered and show them I had something. I left early. That was always my rule, because I also knew myself well enough to know that I got lost constantly. What I didn't do, and this is the part that still irritates me when I think about it, was double-check my MapQuest printout before I got in the car. I'd been driving through farmland and open fields for well over an hour when I realized nothing on the printout was matching what I was looking at. No landmarks. No route numbers. Just asphalt cutting through flat terrain in every direction. I kept going, figuring the road would eventually connect back to something I recognized. It didn't. Instead, it led me into a town, and I use the word town as generously as I possibly can. It was barely a strip of road. A handful of buildings, all weathered beyond what time alone could explain. There was a gas station. A few structures that might have been houses, or might have been storage units, or might have been both at once. And standing outside the gas station, grouped loosely like they'd been there for hours and had no intention of leaving, were several people. The interaction was strange immediately. Not overtly hostile, more like the air pressure changed when I stepped out of the car. These were people who'd been worn down by something. Hard living, maybe. Isolation. When I asked if they could tell me where I was, they stared at me for a beat too long before anyone answered. The one who finally spoke was short with me. Gave me just enough to confirm I'd missed a turn some miles back, that if I stayed straight on this road long enough I'd eventually hit the junction I needed. I thanked them, went to the pump, and started filling my tank. And that's when it happened. I looked up and every single one of them was staring at me. Not glancing. Not watching casually. Staring. 4 of them, standing completely still, like they'd been paused. Their eyes were flat. There was nothing behind them, no curiosity, no hostility, no warmth. Just watching. Like whatever they were doing out here didn't involve blinking or turning away. I finished filling the tank faster than I ever have in my life. Got back in the car. Drove. About 40 minutes after leaving, I was back in the trees. No buildings, no lights, just thick forest on both sides of the road and a strange feeling in my gut that I'd been driving too long without seeing anything recognizable. And then my car started shaking. Not engine trouble. A violent, lurching loss of control, the kind you feel immediately in your bones. I knew what it was before I even heard the sound. Both front tires. Gone. I pulled over, and when I crouched down and really looked, there were nails. Multiple nails in each tire, embedded deep. The kind of thing that happens when you drive over something deliberately placed in the road. I pulled out my brick phone and had almost no signal. That's when I saw the headlights behind me. Far back. Stopped. Just sitting there, aimed at my car, for 5 full minutes. And then they started moving. Slowly. Coming toward me. And at the same moment, 2 more lights appeared from ahead. Coming fast. The same beat-up white pickup truck that had blown past me on this road nearly an hour earlier. The one I hadn't thought twice about. Before I could process any of that, someone slammed a fist against my driver's side window so hard the whole car shook. It was one of the men from the gas station. He was pulling at my door handle, yanking it, throwing his weight against it. Another figure moved to the passenger side and started doing the same thing. They were making sounds but not words. Grunting. Pulling. I was yelling at them to stop, and it was like they couldn't understand me. And then the man at my window stopped. He just stood there and looked at me through the glass. The same flat eyes from the gas station. The same pause. And then, without any warning at all, he opened his mouth and screamed. Not a shout. A full, primal, howling scream at the top of his lungs. Something in me cut through the fear and went straight to action. I threw the door open as hard as I could. The impact knocked him off balance. I ran, not deep into the woods, which would have been a death sentence in the dark, but just a few feet in, and dropped flat to the ground in the undergrowth. I could hear them crashing past me, heading deeper into the trees, assuming I'd kept running. I waited. When I was sure they'd passed, I got up, ran back to my car, grabbed my backpack and phone, and ran down the road. I ran for the better part of 30 minutes before a pair of headlights came from ahead and a woman stopped for me. She was the kind of person who restores your faith in strangers. She let me sit in her passenger seat and called the police herself. The cops came. Looked at my car. Looked at the door dents. Very politely made it clear that without more concrete evidence, there was nothing they could do. Then they wrote me 2 tickets for lapsed registration and insurance. I never found out who those people were or what they wanted. I never found out if the nails were placed intentionally, though I've never believed in that particular coincidence. What I know is this: whatever they had planned for me that night, they had planned it carefully. And if I hadn't trusted my gut in that ditch, I don't think I'd be here to tell you about it. If these stories are already getting under your skin, good. That means you're paying attention. Hit subscribe and the bell right now so you don't miss what's coming next week. And stay with me, because story 2 is the one people always ask about. 3 women. An abandoned farmhouse. And 3 strangers who showed up in the middle of the night wearing the most disturbing masks you've ever heard described. Don't go anywhere. Story 2, the farmhouse. We thought it was just an abandoned barn. I want to be honest about the kind of person I am before I tell this story, because I think it matters. I am not spontaneous. I have never been spontaneous. I am the person in every friend group who needs the full itinerary 2 weeks in advance, who accounts for every variable, who has a backup plan for the backup plan. My friends tease me about it. My therapist says it's a control thing. Whatever it is, it's kept me out of trouble my entire adult life. Until it didn't. This happened the summer before last, and I'm still not over it. I don't say that lightly. I mean, I still wake up some nights with my heart already hammering before I even know why. And then it comes back. And I remember. It started with a breakup. Mine, and then my friend Sarah's, within the same few weeks of each other. 5-year relationship for me, slightly shorter for her. We were both a mess, and we leaned on each other the way you only can with someone going through the exact same thing at the exact same time. Our friend Alyssa was the one who suggested the road trip. Alyssa is, and I mean this with love, the kind of person I could never be. She lives out of a duffel bag. She sleeps in her car, on mountains, on rooftops. She's fearless in a way that makes you simultaneously inspired and exhausted just watching her. When she invited Sarah and me on a cross-country trip she was already planning, every single one of my instincts said no. But something had shifted in me since the breakup. I said yes. The first day was rough. All the unplanned stops, the spontaneous day tours, it was physically uncomfortable for me. But somewhere around day 2, I relaxed into it. And after that, the trip was genuinely incredible. Small towns, hidden overlooks, dive bars where we danced with strangers until 2 in the morning. Alyssa had a talent for finding the places that didn't show up in any guidebook. And then she found the barn. We were driving through the back half of nowhere when Alyssa made a sound and swerved the SUV half off the road. There, set back from a gravel turnout, was what had once been a farm. The kind of forgotten you only see after decades. The farmhouse and barn were still standing, barely, held together more by vines than by their original structure. Nature was slowly eating them. No sign of anyone. No vehicles, no paths worn in the grass, no curtains in the windows. Alyssa wanted in immediately. I didn't. I gave her the trespassing argument, which was real, but honestly the louder argument was the one I kept to myself. I had listened to too much true crime. I wasn't about to wander into an abandoned property and find someone living inside who very much did not want to be found. So we kept driving. The problem was that Alyssa never fully let it go. For the entire rest of the trip, she kept bringing it up. And somewhere over 10 more days on the road, her enthusiasm wore Sarah down. Then it started wearing me down. By the time we were heading home, I had talked myself into it. The farm was so obviously abandoned. What was I actually worried about? Pause. I should have listened to the voice that said, plenty of things that look abandoned are not. Alyssa drove us straight back. She'd memorized exactly how to get there. We rolled up around 4:30 in the afternoon, parked a safe distance from the barn, and walked up. It was as abandoned as it had looked from the road. More so, up close. The doors had half fallen from their hinges. Inside was collapsed machinery and vines growing through the floor. Some of the equipment was strange, heavy, almost medieval. Like something from a dungeon. I assumed it was just old. We explored the farmhouse next, had to kick the door open because it had warped into the frame. Inside, empty except for a small green table and a matching wooden chair, both sun-bleached and cracked. No furniture, no personal belongings, nothing suggesting anyone had been inside in years. What hit me hardest, unexpectedly, was the sadness of it. Someone had built this with their hands and raised a family in these rooms. And now it was nothing. Just dust and rotten quiet. We stayed longer than we planned. Sat on the floor and talked about the trip, our breakups, what we wanted the next year to look like. One of those conversations that only happens when you're somewhere removed from normal life. At some point Alyssa said, we should just stay the night. I looked at my phone. Almost 7 o'clock. The version of me who had spent 2 weeks learning to let go said, why not? We got our sleeping bags, ate cold sandwiches from the cooler, drank a few beers. By 9 we'd laid out our bags on the farmhouse floor. By 10, all 3 of us were asleep. I don't know what time it was when the sound woke me. Late enough that the room was completely dark except for a thin bar of moonlight through the vines on the window. What woke me was the sound of someone going SAH. Not the wind. Not settling wood. A person. The kind of quick, instinctive hush you make when you're trying to quiet something else. I lay completely still. Scanned the room. Nothing. I convinced myself I'd half-dreamed it and lay back down. Then the door exploded. A massive impact, the kind that shook the frame and sent dust raining from the ceiling. That woke everyone. The 3 of us sat in the dark, not breathing, listening. Then, from the window, on the opposite side of the room, came slow, deliberate tapping. Soft and patient. Like someone had all the time in the world. Then the door banging started again. And then it stopped. And the door swung open. 3 people walked in. 2 men and a woman, all of them thin in a way that made your brain register something was wrong before you understood why. They moved slowly. They didn't rush, didn't shout, didn't threaten. They just walked in and stood there. Somehow, that was the most terrifying thing of all. The calm of it. Sarah screamed. And one of the men, immediately, reflexively, screamed back. An exact mirror of her scream, same pitch, same duration. The woman shushed him. Not us. Him. The man in the middle raised his hands and began to gesture. Slowly, deliberately, like a mime performing for an audience. And then they put on the masks. The middle man's mask was a perfect purple cube. That's it. A solid purple cube that replaced his entire head. No face. No eyes cut out that I could see. The second man put on something like a Batman mask, but handmade, cut from thick cardboard, painted badly. The woman put on a medical mask with what I can only describe as plastic Christmas icicles attached to both sides, pointing outward like tusks. They started walking toward us. The louder and more panicked we got, the louder and more agitated they became. Like our fear was feeding something in them. The woman grabbed my shoulders. Something instinctual took over. Because she was so slight, I was able to shove her down hard. Both men looked at her. Sarah sprayed her small keychain pepper spray directly at the group. We ran. The woman grabbed my ankle as I passed. I wrenched free. As I crossed the threshold into the night air, I glanced back and saw her reaching behind her back, into her waistband. I did not stop to find out what was there. We made it to the car. We drove away so fast the tires spun on the grass. We didn't report it. Technically, we were the ones trespassing. But here's the part one still can't make peace with. We had explored that entire property that afternoon. No footprints in the dust. No food. No car. No bedding. Those 3 people came from nowhere in the middle of the night with masks ready and a plan. And then they didn't chase us when we ran. They didn't need to. Because they knew exactly how isolated that place was. We just didn't give them the chance. Before I get into the final story, drop a comment right now and tell me, have you ever had an unexplained experience in the countryside or on an empty road? Something you couldn't explain? I read every single comment on this channel. Every one. And the story I'm about to share is different from the first 2. It doesn't involve strangers. What makes it terrifying is that it involves someone the person already knew. Someone they thought was years behind them. Sometimes the most dangerous thing out there isn't a stranger at all. Story 3, the woman under the truck. She was there the whole time. This is the hardest one to tell. Not because of the violence, though there was nearly a lot more of it. But because of the particular horror of looking at someone and realizing you know their face. My girlfriend and I took a cross-country trip in my truck, a big pickup with a cargo bed long enough for an air mattress. We loved the outdoors, loved hiking, loved that specific peace you only find when you're 100 miles from any city and the stars are actually visible. She was the lighter sleeper. I was the heavier one. This trip was special for a reason she didn't know yet. I was going to propose. I had the ring in my bag. I'd had it planned for months. About 3/4 of the way through the trip, on a ridge at sunset, I did it. She said yes. One of the best moments of my life. That night, I slept like a dead man. Whatever anxiety had been living in my chest for months dissolved the moment she said yes. She did not sleep. The next morning she looked exhausted. When I asked, she hesitated, unusual for her. She chose her words carefully. She said she'd woken up in the middle of the night because she could hear someone walking outside the truck. Not an animal. Footsteps. Careful, deliberate footsteps. She'd stayed flat in the sleeping bag, not wanting to look, and lay there listening for a long time. At one point she was almost certain she heard a voice. Low, indistinct. Muttering. I believed her feelings. I wasn't sure I believed the explanation. I chalked it up to heightened senses after an emotional day, maybe a deer. Then she gasped outside the truck before we left. She was pointing at the dirt beside the driver's side rear wheel. There was an indentation in the soft soil. It looked, genuinely, plausibly, like a partial footprint. Small. Human. I suggested it might be hers. She looked at me like I'd said something deeply offensive. I dropped it. What I should have connected, and didn't, was this. When I went to the back seat to grab something before we left, my trip planner was sitting open on the seat. It was a paper planner I'd been keeping in my bag, a list of every location, date, and rough coordinate for the rest of our journey. I assumed one of us had pulled it out at some point. I put it back. Didn't think about it again. We drove. By mid-morning she was herself again. The previous night felt like a bad dream. The daylight had burned away. That night was our last in the wilderness. She was more nervous than usual, not about bears this time. About the footprint. About the feeling. I offered to sleep in the locked cab. She refused. She wanted our last night under the stars to be our last night under the stars. So I made a private decision. I would stay awake. I would watch. Once she was asleep I'd keep myself alert and keep watch. She fell asleep around midnight. I watched 2 episodes of an old DVD I'd brought. Shut it off. Lay in the quiet. Maybe 20 minutes later, I heard something. Not an animal. Footsteps, slow and measured, moving around the front of the truck. I crawled to the side of the truck bed and peered over the edge. A figure was walking around the front of the vehicle. Small. Hooded. Talking to themselves in a low murmur I couldn't make into words. I pulled back. Controlled my breathing. Watched the figure make a slow circuit. I could tell from the hair, the build, the voice, it was a woman. I planned to vault out the next time she came around the front, confront her, give my fiancé a window to start the truck. I wrote the plan on my phone's notes app and quietly woke my fiancé. Held the screen close to her face before she could react. Don't make a sound. Someone is outside the truck. Take the keys, start the truck. I'll distract them and jump back in. I pressed the keys into her hand. I grabbed my pocket knife and dropped out of the truck bed on my side, landing in a crouch. Nobody there. I stood up straighter. Let my guard down by half a degree. And then a branch connected with my ankle with a crack I felt all the way up through my knee. She had been under the truck the entire time. She came out from beneath the chassis screaming, still swinging. She threw the branch at me. I got my arms up and it hit my forearm instead of my face. She pulled a knife, kitchen knife, long blade, and started swinging it in wide, erratic arcs, advancing, keeping me backing away from the truck. I kept moving her away. When I'd put enough distance between her and the vehicle, I shouted, "Start the truck. Now." My fiancé's door opened. The woman immediately turned and ran toward the truck, still screaming. But she was too far behind. The engine turned. The headlights came on. The woman dove sideways into the dirt. And my fiancé, I will love her forever for this, turned the truck around and drove it directly at her. The headlights caught her. Her hood fell back. I saw her face. I knew her. She was my ex-girlfriend. We'd ended badly enough that I'd had to involve law enforcement. She'd been coming to my home in the middle of the night, standing in the yard, watching the house. That was 6 years ago. By all accounts, she'd gotten better. By all accounts. She didn't chase the truck. She was just kneeling in the dirt, hood off, crying. My fiancé slowed and I jumped into the passenger side. We kept driving. I reported everything as soon as we had a signal. The police found her at her home several days later. She didn't deny a thing. She told them she had found my itinerary, the planner she'd pulled from my backseat while we slept, and had been tracking our stops. She told the police she'd wanted to kill my fiancé. When they asked if she'd wanted to harm me, she didn't answer. She just cried. She was committed to a facility. I don't know her current status. My wife checks social media occasionally. She hasn't resurfaced. And every year that passes without a word from her, I feel something that isn't quite relief. Because I know what I saw under those headlights. I know what was in her face before she went down. And I know that whatever she'd been carrying for 6 years was bigger and darker than any of us realized. 3 different people. 3 different roads. 3 different terrors. And if there's one thing connecting all of them, it's this. The moment right before it happened, each of them thought they were fine. They thought the risk was behind them, or imaginary, or not their problem. The countryside doesn't announce itself. It doesn't send warnings. It just waits for the exact moment you relax. If you've had your own experience, something that happened on a back road, in an empty field, in a place where no one was watching, I want to hear it. Drop it in the comments below. Subscribe if you haven't. Hit the bell so you don't miss what's coming next week. Because I promise you, what I have lined up next makes these 3 look like a warm-up. Stay safe out there. Look before you stop. Lock your doors. And if something feels wrong, trust it.